Ricky Nelson died nearly broke, but left behind a fortune so big it made his family filthy rich. On December 31st, 1985, while millions of Americans prepared to welcome the new year, Ricky Nelson, once the golden boy of rock and roll, boarded a plane chasing one last shot at redemption. He boarded a vintage 1944 Douglas DC-3, a plane that once belonged to Jerry Lee Lewis. To outsiders, it looked glamorous. To those close to him, it was terrifying. The plane was unreliable, prone to mechanical failures, and band members often joked, half seriously, that it was a flying coffin. That night, they were headed to Dallas for a New Year's Eve performance. But somewhere over Texas, just miles from their destination, smoke filled the cabin. It was so dense, the pilots couldn't see their instruments. Witnesses on the ground saw the plane flying unevenly, trailing black smoke before it clipped trees and exploded into flames. The crash site was horrific. Wreckage scattered over 150 yards, engulfed in fire. Only the pilots survived. Everyone else, 7 souls, including Ricky, died instantly. He was just 45 years old, a teen idol turned music icon, gone in the blink of an eye. The news spread like wildfire. Fans mourned. Fans remembered his boyish smile, his string of hits, and the way he had once been the face of teenage cool. But as the headlines poured in, another story began to surface, one far less glamorous. Behind the music and fame, Ricky Nelson's finances were a disaster. His divorce from Kristen Harmon had cost him over $1 million. He had spent lavishly for years, mansions, cars, endless tours just to keep up appearances. By 1985, he was drowning in debt. Rumors swirled that he had nothing left to his name, that his children would inherit only unpaid bills and lawsuits. It didn't add up. How could someone who sold millions of records, starred in movies with John Wayne, and packed stadiums end up broke? Fans couldn't believe it. Some whispered that shady contracts had robbed him. Others said it was reckless spending. A few even claimed he had hidden money somewhere, leaving behind a secret fortune. The confusion only deepened when his ex-wife moved to take control of his estate, insisting she couldn't find any legal document outlining Ricky's last wishes. If that was true, everything, what little was left, would be tied up in endless legal battles. His fiancée, Helen Blair, was left with nothing. And then came the bombshell. Ricky did have a will, written just months before the crash, and it named only his 4 children as heirs. But even that didn't settle the matter. Creditors, lawyers, and long-forgotten debts were waiting to pounce. So which was it? Had Ricky Nelson truly died broke, a fallen star left with nothing but memories? Or was there a hidden treasure buried in his music catalog waiting to be discovered? That was the mystery. And as the years rolled on, shocking discoveries would reveal the truth. A truth so staggering, it would turn his family from near bankruptcy to filthy rich. In the days following the crash, chaos reigned. Fans grieved, the media swarmed, and the Nelson family tried to hold themselves together. But behind the scenes, a quieter, colder battle was brewing. What would become of Ricky Nelson's estate? At first, it seemed like there was no will. His ex-wife, Kristen Harmon, quickly stepped forward, claiming she couldn't find any legal document outlining Ricky's last wishes. If that were true, the law was clear. She could assume control of what little he left behind, managing everything on behalf of the children. To many, it looked like Kristen was about to inherit not only Ricky's debts, but also future earnings from his music. But there was one problem. Kristen and Ricky had been through a bitter divorce. Years of courtroom fights over money, infidelity, and custody had left scars on both sides. The idea that Ricky would willingly leave her in charge of his life's work felt off. His friends and family whispered about it quietly. Had Ricky really left no instructions at all? The answer came from an unexpected place. Ricky's older brother, David Nelson, was sorting through his brother's belongings when he stumbled across a document that would change everything. It wasn't flashy, not even obvious at first glance, but it was a will, signed and dated just months before the plane crash, and it was explosive. In clear, direct language, Ricky left his estate entirely to his 4 children, Tracy, Gunnar, Matthew, and Sam. No mention of Kristen. No mention of his fiancée, Helen Blair, who had died beside him in the crash. It was a decision that stunned everyone who saw it. For Kristen, it was a brutal blow. Not only had she been excluded, but the discovery of the will meant she no longer had the legal right to control the estate. For Helen Blair's family, it was equally devastating. After years by Ricky's side, she was left with nothing. No recognition, no share of his assets, not even a symbolic gesture. To some, it looked cold. To others, it was proof of how fiercely Ricky loved his kids. After years of turmoil and bad decisions, maybe this was his way of protecting them, making sure that whatever fortune was left would go directly into their hands. But there was one glaring problem. Ricky's estate was already drowning in debt. Creditors lined up, lawsuits piled high, and unpaid bills stretched back years. The children had inherited their father's legacy, but it was a legacy of chaos, uncertainty, and possibly ruin. But hidden inside this mess was the seed of something much bigger. At the time, no one could have imagined it. But that single piece of paper, the will everyone thought didn't exist, would one day unlock the path to millions. Ricky Nelson had left behind more than grief. He had left behind a mystery. Just when the dust seemed to settle around Ricky Nelson's will, another story surfaced, one that shocked fans and split the Nelson family's legacy wide open. Ricky Nelson, America's beloved teen idol, had a secret son. His name was Eric Jude Crew, born in 1981. His mother was Georgianne Crew, a woman Ricky had a brief relationship with after his divorce. The affair didn't last, but it left behind something impossible to ignore, a child who carried Ricky Nelson's blood. At first there was doubt. Georgianne claimed Ricky was the father, but the Nelson family questioned it. Was this real or an attempt to grab what little fortune Ricky had left? The whispers grew louder until the case landed in court. There, science spoke louder than rumor. A DNA test confirmed what Georgianne had always said. Eric Jude Crew was Ricky Nelson's son. Legally, there was no denying it. He was family. And yet, Ricky's will didn't mention him. Not a single word. The document David Nelson had uncovered left everything to Ricky's 4 older children, Tracy, Gunnar, Matthew, and Sam. For Eric, there was nothing. No inheritance, no trust fund, not even a symbolic acknowledgement that he existed. On paper, it was as if Ricky never had a 5th child at all. The news hit hard. To many, it seemed cruel. How could a man known for his easy smile, his charm, and his songs about young love cut his own child out of his will? Fans were divided. Some defended Ricky, saying perhaps he hadn't updated the will in time. Others pointed to the bitter divorce and financial chaos of his later years, arguing he might have been trying to keep things simple, protecting the children he had raised while distancing himself from the complications of an affair. But the questions lingered. Was it neglect, a cold decision, or simply bad timing? For Eric, the consequences were devastating. While Ricky's other children would one day inherit millions after the estate fought its way through lawsuits and settlements, Eric was left on the outside looking in. His childhood was marked not by the wealth of a famous father, but by silence, an inheritance of absence.
Georgianne, too, struggled. She had fought for recognition, and the DNA test had given her son the truth. But truth, without a place in the will, meant nothing in the eyes of the court. It was one of the most heartbreaking chapters in the Nelson story. The public loved to imagine Ricky as the perfect family man, the boy from the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, who grew into a devoted father. But behind that image was a reality filled with messy choices, strained relationships, and one boy who would never know what it felt like to be embraced by his father's fortune. And so, the mystery deepened. Ricky Nelson's will had given everything to his 4 children, but left one behind. The world was left asking, why? If Ricky Nelson's death was tragic, what followed was pure chaos. His music had filled homes with joy, but behind closed doors, his estate became a battlefield. Instead of uniting in grief, those closest to him were torn apart by lawsuits, money, and bitter accusations. First was Kristen Harmon, Ricky's ex-wife. Their marriage had been a storm of infidelity, drugs, and fights, ending in a messy divorce that left Ricky with alimony and legal bills. After his death, Kristen reemerged, not as a grieving widow, but as a claimant. She argued she deserved part of Ricky's estate and fought for insurance money and control of shared property. In her view, she had invested years in Ricky's life and career and wasn't about to walk away with nothing. Then came another blow. The parents of Helen Blair, Ricky's fiancée who had died beside him in the crash, filed a wrongful death suit. Helen had been Ricky's constant companion, and her family argued she was more than just a girlfriend. She had been promised security. The lawsuit challenged the will, which left Helen out completely, turning grief into a public legal brawl. Meanwhile, creditors closed in. Ricky owed back taxes, mortgages, and tour advances he never repaid. Credit card companies, lawyers, and business associates all lined up for their share. What once looked like the fortune of a music legend was revealed as a fragile illusion. The ones caught in the middle were Ricky's children, Tracy, Gunnar, Matthew, and Sam. Instead of mourning their father in peace, they were dragged into hearings, depositions, and endless court filings. The press devoured it, splashing headlines about the broken Nelson fortune and the heirs at war. Fans watched in heartbreak as the family of a golden boy sank into the scandals and squabbles of Hollywood dynasties. But one question loomed larger than all the lawsuits. Was there even any money left to fight over? At that moment, it didn't look like it. The estate appeared bankrupt, drowning in debt. But hidden in old recording contracts and unpaid royalties was a secret no one had uncovered, a secret that would flip the story upside down. By the late 1980s, the mood around Ricky Nelson's estate was grim. Lawsuits, debts, and unpaid taxes painted a bleak picture. Fans, who imagined Ricky's children living off a rock and roll fortune, instead saw headlines about repossessions and court battles. But Ricky's greatest treasure wasn't real estate, cars, or savings. It was his music catalog. When lawyers combed through old contracts, they stumbled onto something shocking. Ricky had been one of Capitol Records' top-selling artists, with hits like Hello Mary Lou and Travelin' Man selling millions. But the accounting books didn't add up. Payments were missing, royalties underreported, and deductions riddled with nonsense charges. It became clear Ricky had been underpaid for years, possibly millions. His financial downfall wasn't just reckless spending or divorce battles. Record labels had quietly kept profits that rightfully belonged to him. This revelation changed everything. The estate wasn't worthless. It was a time bomb of hidden value. Every time Ricky songs played on the radio or sold overseas, money was supposed to flow into his accounts. It hadn't, which meant his heirs had a strong case against some of the biggest players in the industry. For Ricky's children, who had watched their inheritance shrink under lawsuits and creditors, this discovery was a glimmer of hope. Maybe their father's legacy wasn't lost. Maybe they could finally claim what was theirs. But unlocking that hidden fortune wouldn't be easy. Record companies were powerful and determined to hold on to the millions they had pocketed. What once looked like the fortune of a music legend was revealed as a fragile illusion. The world thought Ricky Nelson had died broke, but his music, it turned out, was worth far more than anyone realized. The deeper the estate's lawyers dug, the clearer it became. Ricky's so-called worthless estate wasn't worthless. It had been robbed. The biggest culprit? Capitol Records. For decades, Capitol distributed Ricky's music worldwide. On paper, every sale and radio play should have earned Ricky his share. But the books told a different story. Fraud, mismatched figures, and deductions that made no sense. Promotion fees, packaging costs, and vague international adjustments were carved out before Ricky saw a dime. In some cases, whole albums' earnings vanished. While Ricky toured relentlessly and struggled financially, record executives quietly pocketed millions. He hadn't just been underpaid, his fortune had been bled dry. Fueled by this discovery, Ricky's heirs launched a legal assault, accusing Capitol of fraud and breach of contract. The claim wasn't small. They believed Ricky had been cheated out of tens of millions of dollars. For them, it wasn't just about money. It was about justice for a father who had spent his final years chasing paychecks and touring on dangerous planes while others profited off his songs. The lawsuits painted a damning picture. Shady deductions, mismatched reports, and systems designed to exploit artists. Capitol fought back with high-powered attorneys, insisting the deductions were standard practice and allowed by Ricky's contracts. But the Nelsons refused to back down. As the case stretched on, whispers spread through the industry. The Nelson heirs weren't just fighting for themselves. They were exposing a system that had drained countless artists of their income. Other estates watched closely, hoping for a precedent. After years of battles, a settlement was reached. The details were sealed, but insiders claimed the payout was massive. Tens of millions funneled back into Ricky's estate. For the first time since that fiery crash in 1985, the Nelson family could breathe. Ricky's legacy was no longer of poverty, but of a star who, even in death, took on the giants of the music industry and won. The fight against Capitol Records was long and exhausting. The label had deep pockets, powerful lawyers, and decades of experience burying artists in red tape. But Ricky Nelson's heirs refused to back down. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming their father's legacy and proving he hadn't squandered it. He had been cheated. After years of delays, depositions, and endless hearings, the news finally came. Capitol Records had agreed to settle. The exact numbers were sealed, but insiders claimed the payout was in the tens of millions, enough to erase debts, resolve lawsuits, and transform Ricky's worthless estate into something enormous.
For Tracy, Gunnar, Matthew, and Sam, the settlement was life-changing. Months earlier, they faced financial ruin. Now, they were wealthy heirs. Their father's music had finally provided what it should have all along: security, stability, and a lasting fortune. It was vindication. For years, tabloids had painted Ricky as reckless, a star who wasted his fortune. But the settlement revealed a different truth. He had been robbed, not careless. And though Ricky wasn't alive to see it, justice had been served. The family could now honor him properly, funding tributes, keeping his music alive, and restoring the Nelson name in rock and roll history. The settlement also sent shockwaves through the industry. If Capitol had underpaid someone as big as Ricky Nelson, who else had been cheated? His case became a quiet symbol of resistance, a reminder that even giants could be forced to pay. Still, one truth lingered. Ricky never saw a dime. He spent his final years chasing paychecks, living under debt, and touring non-stop. It was justice, but too late. And yet, the fight wasn't over. Another label, Sony Music, was waiting in the wings. The Capitol settlement gave the Nelson family breathing room. Debts were cleared, lawsuits ended, and Ricky's legacy was restored. But just as the dust settled, another storm rose, this time with Sony Music. By the 2000s, music was shifting from CDs to digital downloads and streaming. For most artists, it meant new income. For the Nelson estate, it meant new betrayal. Lawyers discovered that Ricky's royalties were shockingly low, and worse, Sony was allegedly double-dipping.
When Ricky's music was streamed or sold overseas, Sony deducted massive international fees. Then, when the money flowed back to the US, they applied more deductions. In short, the estate claimed Sony charged Ricky's catalog twice for the same service. To Ricky's children, it felt like history repeating itself. Their father had been underpaid his whole career, and now, even in death, labels were still draining his legacy. Determined, they filed suit. Sony denied wrongdoing, insisting its practices were standard. But the Nelsons' lawyers painted a damning picture of an industry giant enriching itself at Ricky's expense. The case dragged on for years, but both sides knew the stakes. For Sony, exposure of its accounting practices was dangerous. For the Nelsons, victory could mean millions. Eventually, as with capital, the fight ended in a settlement. Once again, the details were sealed, but insiders whispered it was even bigger than the first. Ricky Nelson's catalog, once dismissed as a relic, was now generating wealth at a staggering scale. For Tracy, Gunnar, Matthew, and Sam, it was transformative. They had gone from children of a nearly bankrupt star to heirs of a fortune built not on scandal, but on music. The music their father had earned, but never received. This time, they had won. And the victory was sweeter than anyone could have predicted. When Ricky's plane crashed in 1985, his 4 children were left with heartbreak and the shadow of debt. Newspapers predicted financial ruin, but fate had a different plan. The lawsuits against Capitol and Sony changed everything. After years of battles, the settlements brought in tens of millions, more money than Ricky ever saw in his lifetime. Almost overnight, his children became millionaire heirs. For Tracy, the eldest and only daughter, the win was deeply personal. She had endured the divorce battles, the media circus, and the pain of losing her father young. Now, she stepped into the role of matriarch, determined to protect both the estate and Ricky's image. For Gunnar and Matthew, the twins, the fortune provided freedom. Their band, Nelson, had once gone platinum, but fame had faded. The settlements gave them room to focus on music without financial pressure, and the chance to keep their father's catalog alive. For Sam, the youngest, who was just a boy when Ricky died, the wealth meant security and a connection to a father he barely remembered. While his siblings had memories of tours and fame, Sam inherited a legacy in royalties and opportunities. Together, the siblings built a life few imagined after that crash: private schools, homes in the hills, and financial stability. More importantly, they used their resources to revive their father's name. Tribute shows, re-releases, documentaries, and new projects ensured Ricky's music shined again. They weren't just millionaires, they had become guardians of their father's legacy. In life, Ricky Nelson was adored by millions, yet his finances told a different story. By 1985, his fortune was gone, lost to divorces, mismanagement, and predatory contracts. Behind the glamour was a man struggling to stay afloat. And here lies the final twist. Ricky himself died nearly broke, but his voice, the songs he poured his soul into, never stopped working. Records kept spinning, royalties kept flowing, and decades of unpaid balances hid a gold mine he never saw. Only after his death did lawyers uncover how valuable his catalog truly was. The courtroom battles exposed years of underpayment, revealing a fortune Ricky never lived to enjoy. It's almost cruel to think about. Through the 70s and 80s, Ricky toured small venues to survive, when in reality he should have been living like the superstar he was. The money was there, buried in contracts and hidden by corporations. He just never lived to see it unlocked. For his children, the settlements changed everything. They inherited the wealth denied to him and the duty to protect his music. But for fans, though, the twist is bittersweet. The fortune came too late for the man who earned it. And yet, Ricky Nelson's story proves something enduring. Fame fades, money slips away, but music lives on. His voice, smooth, timeless, unforgettable, continues to echo across generations. Every spin of Hello Mary Lou, every stream of Travelin' Man, every new listener adds to the legacy he left behind. Ricky may have died nearly broke, but in death, his music made him richer than he ever dreamed. A tragic irony, but also proof that the true measure of a legacy is not dollars in life, but the timeless echo it leaves behind. And Ricky Nelson's voice is still singing.